What's up, amigos? Commander Jaime here. Today we're gonna do a Spectral Duke premium deck profile. I'm gonna actually cover the winning image, go into the card choices, and actually show off some combo plays, and then wrap it up with some credit and of course an outro. So let's get right into it. So onto the winning image. So really, Spectral Duke brings to the table a different kind of style of playing Gold Paladins. We have the ability to restand himself, so we have access to a restanding Vanguard, and it's pretty cool actually, where it actually benefits on depending on the damage that you have. So for example, if you have 4 more damage, it gets an additional drive check. So we have access to where the first attack is twin drive, and then the third or the second attack will have 3 drive checks at that point. So you get to see 5 drive checks in total, which actually makes a huge difference. And so that turn might be actually preferred over than striding, but we do have powerful strides that we can fall back to. We got Bombarding Dragon over here, and we have Spear X Dragon, very good cards that we can fall back to into striding. And of course we have access more to the G zone. We have access to Percival, Aglavale, so we can start generating those Excel circles, further increasing the ceiling of our deck, being much more aggressive too, and it generates advantage for us too to continue building a field where Spectral Duke, in order to restand, needs to retire rear guards, and these are the key rear guards that we want to retire. And as we build that field formation and properly do those turns, it actually makes for an effective turn. And again, we have access to the G zone. And so I'm going to go into a different style of actually explaining the card choices. So I'll start off first with the Spectral Duke support. Basically the chain right, in a sense, it got retrained, and I'll go with that first. Then the rest of the support to support it. Then finally wrapping up with the triggers. After that, going to the G zone, where we can go into the strides, then the G guards, and then of course going into place. So let's start. So starting off with the Spectral Duke chain right support, in a sense, and rechain. So we're going to start with grade 0 over here. We're actually using the original chain right grade 0 starter for a couple reasons. So first, I'll talk about his skills. So when he's actually ridden by a card like over here, the grade 1 Vordomir, you have the ability to check the top 7 cards for either the grade 2 Vordomir or the Spectral Duke Dragon and add it to your hand. And so this helps us actually with that consistency, and that actually matters why we want that consistency to ride through the 1 to the 2 to the 3 as our vanguards at that point. And so if you use a V era starter, you just get a blind draw. So if I can get a chance to be having an additional a chance to actually search for the key pieces that I want to write up, that's much more appreciated. And so that's why I play this starter. This is actually a good idea from my good amigo John, who actually plays Gold Paladins, and he's been playing a lot of Spectral Duke as well. And he came up with this idea, and it was recommended to me by him, and I've been liking it since then as well. And then of course my friend Duke, who's also a Mega Calling player, has played with John. He actually agrees with that too, and so he also recommended it too. With the grade 1, so 2 skills. The first one is the Vanguard Circle skill. It's the same exact skill. So when it's placed onto Vanguard Circle, you can check the top 7 for the grade 2 or the grade 3. Consistency reasons. So when you ride this guy over that, you get 2 chances of actually doing that skill. So check top 7, maybe grab the grade 2, then check top 7, grab the grade 3. So you have your ride chain really at your disposal at that point, so you don't have to worry about some weird consistency issues. And then of course Vanguard Circle, it has the ability that when it's retired by Vanguard Circle by your card's ability, put this into your soul, and then your Vanguard gets plus 5k until the end of the turn. And that actually matters, and I'll explain that why. But going into the grade 2, so now as we ride up to grade 2, we have the grade 2 Vordomir. And so this has the ability Vanguard Circle, Vanguard Circle continuous, where if you have the grade 1 in basically your soul, this gets additional plus 1k. So it becomes a 10k base unit as your Vanguard, as your rear guard. So it has that force-like grade 2, where it has basically the 10k base, which is really solid if you think about it. And then the second skill, of course, it actually has 3 skills. So the second skill is that when it's retired from Vanguard Circle by your card's ability, just like this one, but this one goes into your soul and you countercharge one. So you get to get a counterblast back, so you can reuse it for later, which is really good actually. So it gives you a form of countercharging outside of Din Drain. And then the third skill is one of the big things that make this ride consistency such a major thing. So when this unit is rolled upon by Spectral Duke Dragon, then you can check the top 5 and then call up to 2 cards and put them into Vanguard Circle and then shuffle your deck. That gives you resources to work with. That's very vital for Spectral Duke's ability to retire. But not only that, you activate Unite, and Unite is big in premium, so you're able to go into your strides like Spear X Dragon more easily. You're able to do different strides later on if you need to build resources or just activate Unite at the same time. Being able to ride this and go into first strike potentially to set up a solid turn helps with that too, but especially when you do the Spectral Duke turn. So what does that look like? Spectral Duke has 2 skills. The first skill is a continuous Vanguard Circle skill, where if you have the grade 2 Vortimir installed, this gets plus 1k as well. And then if your opponent's Vanguard is a grade 3 or greater, this gets additional crit as well. So really what it simulates is you have a 13k base Vanguard with a crit on top of it. So it's like a force Vanguard basically, which is pretty cool having that aesthetic, because Spectral Duke Dragon we saw with Spectral Duke Blaster Diablo, however they named that card, but it's like that Shadow Paladin aesthetic from Ren, which he actually played this deck when they went into that arc of just Gold Paladins. So that, I think that's where they got that aesthetic from. The second skill is the most important thing, just like I said, restanding. So how does it work? It's a once per turn auto at the end of the battle that it attacks, so you could attack a rearguard if you want. You can counter blast, retire 3 of your rearguards, and then of course stand this unit and it gets drive -1. Now if you have 4 more damage, it gets drive +1 instead of the -1. So that's where you can see you can either have 2 drive checks, then 1 drive check, or 2 drive checks, then 3 drive checks. So ideally you want to capitalize that with the multi-drive check, but if you're going first and you have a decent field setup, you can really be aggressive and restand, so regardless of the minus drive check, and you may neg yourself, but if you actually ride on top of this and have other cards to kind of like negate that minus, it works out really well actually. And so this is something that you have access to disposable. This is for consistency reasons, and this is the core that you want to rely to, because again, it helps with its own grade 3 turn solid or restanding or falling back to, but also being able to stride, or even just be able to stride during your first grade 3 turn if you have enough counterblast and go the Spirex route. As long as you have counterblast, and I mean you have Unite at that point, it's really easy. And there are some plays that I'm going to talk about in the next cards that you can do during your ride phase, because you're able to superior call 2 cards with Vortimir when you ride up. Now onto the rest of the deck before we hit the triggers. We have Percival over here as a grade 3, we have Agaveo as a grade 2, Kahiden as a grade 2, the grade 1s over here as Gorberdok, then Drain, and of course Howell. And so I'll start with the Percival Agaveo duel. So again, as we've seen with prior Gurguit Percival builds, we've seen that Percival has a lot of the Excel circle generation. So when you ride up with Spectral Duke Dragon, not only you get the check top 5 for 2 rearguards, you get an Excel circle. So that's very helpful. And then if you call, let's say, cards like Percival, then his skill can go off as well, because his skill is that when he's placed, if your Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, which it is at that point, then you can counterblast 1, discard 1, get an imaginary gift, Excel circle, and then search up for either your deck or your drop zone for the Agaveo, and then call it to regard, of course. And this is a hard once per turn. And so that's really the primary skill that we want to use. You don't really use the Vanguard skill, which gets units +5 on the additional regard circles, but the most important thing is that when you call this card, you're able to generate another Excel circle plus from it, search from Agaveo, and then Agaveo can be served as a beater too. So basically on regard circle, when it attacks, you can put another regard into your soul. This gets 10k until the end of the battle, and then it bounces back to hand, so you can use him for later. He can be discard fodder for PGs, for example, too, or reusability at that point too. And then of course, if you miss the chain ride, for example, then you can ride them as Vanguard, where you can actually counterblast 1, check the top 3 for a card that you can call them to regard circle, and then put the rest in the bottom of the deck as well in any order. So that helps too, just in case you missed that ride chain going up at that point. But you can keep abusing Percival with Agaveo to generate an additional Excel circle, and that actually matters because you're building an advantage, you're building a field, so you can then retire it with Spectral Duke, or you're just building a very powerful field that you're just gonna smack to the face, right? As we've seen with Gurguit days. And following up with a little bit of the field setup, we have the Kahide and Hoel pair. And so I think it'll make sense to explain Hoel first. So Hoel has 1 skill. It's the regard circle continuous, where if your unit in the same column is called this turn, it gets +5. But if it's Kahiden, it gets +10k instead of +5. So it's a bigger column when you have Kahiden. So what does Kahiden do? Kahiden on regard circle auto when it's placed, counterblast 1, discard a card from your hand, look at the top 3, call it to regard circle, and then of course if you have a Hoel on your Vanguard circle, on your regard circle, then you draw a card. And so that's where you can mitigate that discard. So for example, if you call Hoel from hand, that's a -1 from your hand technically, and then you call Kahiden, that's another -1, and then you discard, that's like a -3. But then Kahiden will give you a card back, so that's a -2 by essence of calling these 2 cards. or if these cards are actually called by superior call. So if, for example, the Spectral Duke ride over the Vortimir calls these cards, then you just actually build a solid field, you start being in that column. This will be a 27k column that is solid. You can also use the what's his name, Ballman's and of course Gareth combo. John actually is a big proponent of that, so he's using that pair where it kind of comes out the same as cost, just a little different flexibility. You got Gareth that is an 8k that can become an 18k, so he can become an attacker, where Hoel is really tied to being a booster, which is not a bad thing, but then he can become a booster for different regards too, so not just Kahaiden to make that column a little bit bigger. I like the Kahaiden a little more right now, but I mean, if you have Ballman's and Gareth, you can try that out too. It pretty much serves the same purpose as well, helping that field setup, because you can have bodies on the board. You want to have some solid bodies on the board, if you get what I'm saying. You want quality regards, and so Ballman's and Gareth help with that because you're guaranteed those cards. This can get you Agleveos, this can get you Percival, this can get you other cards like the other Vortimirs, for example. So it has some flexibility in there. And so there's pros and cons to that pair duel that you can wing it. So really at that point, tweak it to your preference. And so I just wanted to spend some time to really elaborate that a little bit. And then finally, we'll go into these grade ones over here. We have Gurguit. This is where basically you place it on from hand, check top 5, add a grade 3, and then discard card. This is super good in this deck. As you can see, I'm playing 4 of it, and you can grab Spectral Duke Dragon, which you need to be able to ride consistently. You can pay the cost for the Ultimate Stride because Spectral Duke is going to be your Vanguard. Then Percival is a card that you're going to be wanting to go to Rigard Circle and proc it. So these grade 3s that you grab with Gurguit, you still want them. You want them to ride, call, etc., pitch for stride, all that kind of stuff. So it's super beneficial. And then during your turn, if 2 or more Rigards are called this turn, this gets plus 5k. Basically, if you have Unite, this is a 13k booster, a 13k hitter. So if you call a field, if you have an Excel circle, this can easily become an 18k beater. If it's on a regular circle, it becomes a 13k beater or a 13k booster. Sometimes I stack this behind the Spectral Duke Dragon, so that way you have 13 plus 13 make a 26k column. And then when you retire a card like the grade 1 Vortimir, and if you have any triggers, then that Spectral Duke Dragon becomes a little bit powerful on its own to the second swing. And so this is a great booster in general and a great consistency grade 3 searcher for sure. And then we have Dindrain over here. Dindrain is almost like a flex spot too, where it's like I play 3 just to be able to see it enough, and so when it's placed by your card's ability, you can Soul Blast 1 and you can do 1 or 2 effects. Basically, you either draw a card or you can countercharge and it gets plus 3k until the end of the turn. So it can become a 10k booster by countercharging, or you could just draw another card. And so that can be vital depending on what your board setup, your resources look like. And what's really cool, and this is something that I'll show in the combo plays, is that if you ride onto your grade 3 Spectral Duke, call cards like Percival and Dindrain, and you only have like 1 or 2 counterblast, you can use that counterblast and then immediately countercharge with it. So you can then use that counterblast for either the Spectral Duke or a Kahaiden, or even like go into Spirex at that point. So you have very flexibility. And then of course your strides superior calls such as like Glorious Reigning Dragon, Spirex, and so on, where you can countercharge or you can draw a card for that point. And so Dindrain plays that role of resource generation, but also resource management with the countercharging aspect. So we have the grade 2 Vortimir that also countercharges, but in order to do that, we have to retire it. And in order to retire it, that means we have to do Spectral Duke's Dragon's ability. So really it refunds the cost for Spectral Duke at that point, instead of this being like almost like an on-demand countercharge to work with for the next skill at that point. Hope that makes a lot of sense. With that, let's go into the triggers. Onto the triggers, we have the 4 heal, 4 draw PGs, and 8 crit. So heals are the V-Series heal triggers. They're just bigger shield, and I haven't had the need to use the hair from the G era where you can countercharge or soul charge. You have plenty of soul in this deck as well because of the whole right chain and retiring, and then the cards going into soul. You got Agleveil also putting cards into the soul, so soul isn't an issue really. Countercharge can be an issue, it just depends on how you moderate your resource management. The draw PG is preferred because I do appreciate the extra draw, especially if you're doing 5 drive checks, for example. You can see a draw trigger at that point. Defensively, early game too, you really don't want to go as aggro because then you get counterblast denied. So if you get damage denied, or not damage denied, if you get attacked, then there's a chance of seeing a draw trigger, which can give you an additional card to work with and help with consistency reasons too at that point too. And it could be another card to help you actually help for that retire cost, for example. Then we follow up with the 8 crit over here. We want to be able to strike. We want to keep cards like Percival in our hand so we can call it, get the additional circle. If we have cards like Spectral Duke, we can either rewrite it for the next turn or use it to pay the ultimate cost strike. So strike fighter crits are very appreciative. Then we have here the one that goes into Soul plus 10k to the Vanguard. This is per battle, so it's not by the end of the turn. So if you, let's say, G guarded or you're shred and you fall back into a turn where you're going to do Spectral Duke because you're at 5 damage, more than likely you have a solid 5 drive check turn with a restanding Vanguard with a built field with crit pressure on top of that, especially if your opponent like heal back to a lower damage that has that pressure. So then you can plop down a card like here where you can attack as a 9k booster on XL Circle, for example, or as a booster and you swing and all that kind of stuff. But when your Spectral Duke Dragon attacks, if it's the second attack or the first attack, it really depends on how you dictate. It's an additional 10k of power. Because at that point you have GB1 active from either striding or G-guarding at that point. And so this card actually matters. And again, it helps build up soul that you can use for later on. And it makes sense in the G-zone too, why the soul is so important as well. Onto the G-zone, we have 11 G units. So we have 3 Spear Dragon, we have 2 Bombardment Dragon, we have 2 Glorious Reigning Dragon, we have 1 Ultima, we have 1 Radiant Sword Gurguit, and 2 of the Helios Gurguit, which actually can come up too. And so I'll start with these guys first on the top. So Spear Dragon, like I said, he has the G-zone skill where it's Unite. Again, if you write Spectral Dragon over the Grade 2 Vortimer, you have you instant Unite. And then you can Counterblast 2, discard a card from your hand, and then stride this onto your Vanguard Circle from face down. So this enables you where your opponent may still be in Grade 1 or Grade 2 Vanguard, and you just stride on them forcefully with that skill. And we've seen that with Gurguit and Ezel before, for example. So we have access to the stride too as well, if we want to have that route. And it really helps and depends on this field setup too. If you don't have the proper quality regards to retire for the Spectral Duke Dragon, and you do have the 2 Counterblasts, that's where Spear X will actually come into play at that point. And what's really cool is that when you ride, that happens during the right phase, the Superior Calling. And so you can still dictate if you want to go the Spectral Duke way or you want to go into Spear X, for example. So you have that flexibility, or you could just normal stride too. So the second skill is where, you know, you have that once per turn act. You can Soul Blast 1, turn a card face up in the G-zone, any card, then look at the top 5 cards of your deck and call 2, and then shuffle your deck. So that helps build up the field, especially if you don't have great cards in your hand or great cards in the field. This might be the better route, generate a better feel, in the meantime set up for that next turn. And I play 3. I was playing 2, but then I bumped it up to 3 because if you're in a grind game, especially if they're damage denying you, it's a Soul Blast 1 to call 2. And as you can see with this deck, you'll have plenty of soul to actually have, so you can take advantage of that and still apply pressure at that point. Bombardment Dragon is really cool, and what's the most impactful thing about this card is its flexibility. And so when it attacks, you can put 2 rear guards to the bottom of your deck in any order, and then of course turn any face-up card in your G-zone. You can draw 2 cards, and then you call 2 cards from your hand to a rear guard circle. And then if you did call 2 cards, this gets an additional crit. So a couple things are happening, and really you're recycling rear guards back to your deck, so you can recycle the non-triggers, so like valuable rear guards like a Hiden or Halal, for example, that you want to see later on in Superior Call. Or you can put back triggers if you want to build your deck more of like a trigger heavy deck kind of thing. And what's really cool is that it calls from hand. So if you're facing a clan that restricts Superior Calling outside of hand, such as Gridora and Mega Colony, this card is something you can fall back to, because if you think about it, Gold Paladin thrives on Superior Calling from the deck mainly, and so if you get locked out by Gridora, you're kind of shit out of luck at that point. And so that's why Bombardment Dragon actually is like, oh well, I'll just call from my hand at that point and recycle and then get a crit, and you still have that pressure. So this is a strat that you can fall back to, especially if you don't have rear guards or the right setup to still retire for the Spectral Duke Dragon, because you still are able to restand, assuming that you're able to ride a grade 3 to restand from being stunned from Gridora. So that helps us too as well. And so I play 2 because it's a flexible card. It doesn't require any soul, it does not require any counterblast. So that's another key thing that you realize, that this card doesn't require resources. And so you can use those resources for your other cards, or if you didn't have any left because you used them up prior turn, then this is something you can fall back to. It's a very flexible card. I really like the art and everything too. It looks really badass in my opinion. We have the Glorious Reigning Dragon here. Now this card is great. This enables multi-attack. It's Unite, Counterblast 1, flip a copy of itself. When it attacks, you can choose 2 of your rear guards. put them at the bottom of the deck in any order, and then of course you check the top 7 cards of your deck, and then you can call up to the number of rearguards depending on the cards you have face up in the G zone. And then if you call 3 or more, then you're able to shuffle your deck, of course, and then of course if you call 3 or more, that's where you can counter charge and then soul charge. So Glorious Reigning Dragon really profits more when you are able to call at least 3 rearguards, and so this helps you generate more attacks. That Counter Blast you use is immediately counter charge back, and then of course you get another card in Soul, which is really cool, and it helps set up for another stride that can be a finisher. So this is kind of like a finisher, advantage gaining, you know, work with you god, attack, multi-attack. So the number of Excel circles really helps with that too, so you just have more multi-attack. And then if you have cards like Haiden, for example, that call other cards, or Percival that calls a Naglivale, you can extend more attacks at that point. And what I found myself with this deck, with the Excel generation, you're easily able to get to 8-9 attacks by your second grade 3 turn or your second stride turn if you're using Percivals, since you're the moment you ride to grade 3 turn. So you really have very powerful multi-attack, and it's just making those numbers, making those counts actually count at that point. And then here we have Ultima is the best finisher in this deck. It's amazing because with the Excel circles, again, Counter Blast 2, grab 4 cards, call 2 of them, and then stack 2. You stack the crits, obviously, and then all of your units get the benefit of the triggers. So if you have a bunch of Excel circles, Ultima will even have those units gain it. So if you have the 5 rearguards and then like 4 rearguards additionally from the Excel circles, you have like 9 rearguards that all get the benefits of the trigger. And it's really bonkers in Gold Paladin. You know, I use this in Genesis, which is a Force clan. Other clans are Force clans too as well, like Royal Paladin, you got Shadow Paladin, for example, and OTT is a Protect clan. Gold Paladin is the Excel clan in the United Sanctuary Nation. And Ultima is like, hey, if you got rearguards, here's the triggers. So it becomes a super deadly turn by just the cost of a 2 Counter Blast and Ultima Stride. So definitely key card, and I definitely recommend. And we have Radiant Sword and Helios. So I'll wrap up first with Helios, then finish up with Radiant. So with Helios over here, drive check. Wow. Its first skill is an act once per turn, Unite. You can flip a copy of itself and it gets an additional drive check. That's what I meant. So you can get quad check. And then the second skill is GB3. When this attacks, this this also gets through 5k for each of your rearguards, so it gets big and beefy, and then your opponent cannot call grade 1s or greater when this unit attacks. So if you notice your opponent's using grade 1 PGs or greater, this is a solid card that you can fall back into. Or if you're in a weird situation where maybe that quad check is still helpful but you can't do any other stuff, it's just there for there. I only play the pair. You can play 4 if you want to, but I don't see myself going myself into. Because we are able to use Spectral Duke's ability, I'm not as dependent onto the G zone. So your GB count may not be as high consistently throughout your games and your matchups and all that kind of stuff, because Spectral Duke can actually do really well on its own at that point too. Radiant Sword is phenomenal as a finisher too if you can't go into Ultima. So what it does is GB2, you can Counter Blast 1, Soul Blast 2, this gets 5k for every single of your rearguards. So the more rearguards you have, the bigger this card gets, so your Vanguard is going to be swinging huge. And then you can choose up to 5 of your rearguards and they get plus 5k until the end of the turn. So this is phenomenal because it is not once per turn. So if you have 2 Counter Blasts and enough Soul, which will you have, because you have cards that build up the Soul, you can use it twice or 3 times and you really give your units plus 10k, plus 15k. And this Vanguard is going to be really, really, really big. So they either have to see the Vanguard or they have the PG alongside with all the rearguards that have got power. So you can make those solid attacks or columns, you know, additional 10k, 15k, and really like push for game at that point too. So 1 Radiant Sword, I recommend still playing that because the way the deck functions, you do have the resources for that too, especially the Soul is much more easier. So it's not uncommon if you Soul Blast 4, Soul Blast 6 at that point and still be able to have enough Soul or just enough to actually do that turn. So definitely recommended. Lastly, the G guard. So we're playing 5 G guards. We're playing 2 Slammy Flare, we're playing 1 Rhea, and then 1 Elise. So with Rhea, it's the simple one. If you have 2 or more rearguards, it gets plus 5k until the end of the battle. That's your 20k shield if you want a G guard and actually start ranking up the GB1. example, having your GB3 or your cards for like Glorious Reigning Dragon, which actually benefit for more G zone flips. So you can G guard instead of actually just popping down a 20k trigger, heal trigger. Or you can go into Slay Me, which is a better card where you can choose one of your rear guards, bottom deck it of course, and then check the top 5 and then call up to 2 cards with different grades onto Guardian Circle and then shuffle your deck. So this helps you actually build more shield value from your deck, and it's random, don't get me wrong, but there's sometimes, depending on how you're filtering and decked in your cards, most of the time you're gonna go for your grade 3 Percivals, your grade 3 Spectral Dukes, your grade 2s like Aglavale, Kahiden will grab another grade 2. So really what's left mostly in your deck will be grade 1s and the triggers. So that shield is consistently pretty big. And then if you get the draw PG, you can perfect guard actually. So that works out too as well. So that can be the cost of 2 cards for a perfect guard that you didn't have access to, and Slay Me got you the perfect guard, for example. And I played 2, and it helps recycle cards. Like I said, it returns 1. So it's, in a sense, recycle some key cards I can use for later on. The thing is that both Rhea and Slay Me require rear guards on the field to work in general. So then you have the Elise that doesn't require that, where Elise is the GB1 flip card. So you can Counter Blast 1, flip a G guard on the G zone, and then actually you can basically just check the top 2 cards and then call 1 to Guardian Circle. And then when that battle is over, that if the attack does not hit, then you can move that card to the rear guard circle and actually put the other one back to the bottom of the deck. So that helps with build setup too. And at the same time, if you do have the extra counterblast, this might be a key card just to kind of help fetch for a key piece potentially. So you may get like a grade 1, for example, to have like a booster for later on. So if you get like, for example, if you're going for the Spectral Duke turn, that might be great to grab the grade 1 Boromir. Or if you want to have a decent booster, you have Gorbaduck, you have Hoel, for example. Or if you go for a grade 2, then you have some potential quality rear guard that can attack later on and go from there as well. And so that's that flexibility. And of course, it flips the card in the G zone, which helps with Glorious Reigning Dragon and other cards like that. Now into the combo part of the video. So you will have typically a board setup of like this, where you have 2 counter blasts to work with, and then of course when you actually roll up to grade 3, you have the Boromir grade 2, so you get to call top 2. So let's say you call the Percival, you call the Dindrain, you counter blasted 1, and then you counter charge 1, you call the Aglavale, all that kind of stuff. You got another Excel circle, place the Aglavale here for example, and then if you call a card like Kahiden, then you use the counterblast to generate the field, and it looks like something like this basically. So this is assuming now that you still have 1 counterblast to work with and 1 pattern. This is just one way to do it. There's multiple ways to set up a board and everything. Like for example, you can have the Gorbaduck as a booster for better numbers. So depending on the cards that you're going to face against, maybe you want to poke with this like a 17k attack, whether it be their Vanguard, the rear guard. Then you have this over here where it's 10 plus 8 because you do have the grade 1 Boromir, so it's an 18k attack. And this is where you can actually have the Vanguard boosted attack, and then you drive check. So like example, you got critical triggers because you're a boss, and you can give the power and crit to your Vanguard, because if it's going to hit, then you can get the benefit of an additional crit at that point, and the power will give it strength too. And then you can give maybe like the power to another column. These are actually going to hit already over the 24k or 23k threshold, so they already hit a trigger on their own. So just be mindful of that. And then once you do that, then the end of the battle skill, you can retire and of course counter blast 1. And then of course these are going to go into soul. So grade 2 with counter charge, grade 1 is going to give you +5 again, then restand. So then let's say your opponent's still grade 2, so then you are still 13k base, you just don't have the additional crit. But then if you drop a crit trigger, then that helps with that. You got +5, so then it's an 18k attacker with that, but then you got the trigger, so it makes it a 28k attacker. So you can start seeing those numbers stack up, and depending on what they have set up, maybe you want to actually get a chance to let's say you attack with a weaker column, or let's say Aglavale for example. So Aglavale can put into Percival, into Soul to get 10k. So then it becomes 24k. It hits, pokes, it bounces back. Then you can attack with your Vanguard if you want at that point with 1 drive check, and then if you get another crit, great, because we're gold paladin. And then this is 27k plus with any triggers, and that's your field. So as you can see, you build up a field, you kind of like clear it too, you're retiring, you're bouncing things back. And this is minimal for the requirement of Rhea as a G guard, or even for Slay Me, you can return maybe the this, or you can use it as an intercept and then return this. And then next turn you can go into your strides if you want to, or if they put you to higher damage, then instead of 1 drive check, you'll see drive 3 with an additional crit as Vanguard. And really that looks pretty much the same at that point. So if you take a lot of damage, it actually helps you out on the Spectral Duke turn. So sometimes decks are very aggressive and they give you a lot of damage, and this is a good way to come back when you have that extra drive check. So you're gonna see more drive checks, but if you don't have the combo pieces to really do a proper Spectral Duke turn, then it can hurt like hell. So just be mindful of that. Now I'm going to show the Spirit Dragon turn, and if your opponent's still a grade 2 or grade 1, then you can do this play. So assuming you rode up to grade 2, your Superior call Percival and then drain in this example again, you're able to counterblast, generate another Excel Circle, get another gift, call the Aglavale from deck, and then you can use Dendrin and Soul Blast 1 and countercharge that back. So you still have 2 open counterblasts, and you call 3 rearguards. So you're already Unite as well, and so all you have to do now is actually just counterblast 2, for example. You want to Superior Stride into the Spirit X Dragon now, and then you can Soul Blast 1 to actually call 2 rearguards. And so let's say for whatever choice you get these 2 instead, Aglavale and a Gorberduck. And so again, you have Unite, so this will get +5 on its own, and you have another Aglavale to work with, and your opponent's a grade 2, more than likely grade 2 or maybe grade 1 at worst. And as you can see, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rearguards by just riding, and then Superior Striding with Spirit X Dragon. And you can see that this field is really pretty strong on its own. You have a decent hand size too as well, and then your hand's gonna grow again. So in this case, if you want to start poking, you can poke with the 13k attack, then the 17k attack, and then once you get over here, because this counter charge, this is a +3, so it's a 10k booster, so you want to attack with the weaker Aglavale, for example. But if you want to get the chances of multiple triggers, you can do that too. So when you do a drive check, you get a crit, you get a crit, and you get a crit, because we're Gold Paladin, and then distribute to those guys, and then this will attack. You can put any card into the soul, then it bounces, and then of course the same thing with this column. So this is +10, +10, so this is 29, and then any triggers, that works. And you can suck up the Gorberduck over here, and then you bounce this. And then at the end of the turn, this goes back to the G zone, and this is your field. And so you have 1 rearguard to still work with, so you can use Slamming Flare, and you use 2 counterblasts. You're already GB2 live at that point. And then next turn, if you want to stride or if you G guarded, you can go into Ultima as well, and or do the Spectral Duke turn as well with 4 to 5 damage. I definitely recommend only doing it when you're at 5 damage, so you don't heal all of it. Again, just like the Ultima Turn, like I explained, this can get really nutty. As you can see, if you generated like 4 Excel circles at this point, you can Ultimate Stride, set up your field. You can call cards from your hand and start really setting up a field like this. And even if you don't have any counterblasts left, you can still work with this. You got Hoel that still gives the +10k to this column, so if you just call the Kahiden, it works with that power boost. You got all these other cards that are in the Excel circle, so they're hitting over that 13k mark as well. And then because you're gonna stack 2 critical triggers when you attack, then you're gonna have those 2 guaranteed critical triggers, and then if you drop check another one, it's even nuttier at that point. And each of these rearguards are going to get it. So you can see 5 rearguards here, 4 rearguards there. They're all going to get the triggers, so they're +20k each at least guarantee with all critical 3. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 attacks that are critical 3 lethal, and your opponent has to guard a little bit if they're at 3 damage already. And then if you got a 3rd drive check and you got another crit trigger, that's 4 crit at that point. So it's a very strong turn, and I just wanted to show you visually and really show you how that looks like, and how like, wow, this is crazy. These last 3 I'm going to show like really quickly because they're very easy and simple to explain, but I just want to show you visually as well. When you have Radiant Sword, for example, and you can do Ultima, you can just pay Counterblast, Soul Blast 2 for each of its costs. So at this point, I'm going to Soul Blast basically 4 cards and then Counterblast 2. These front row are going to get +5 twice, and so this column could be 27k on its own, where these other front row cards got +10k. And you can see that this field is going to be really heavy. It's going to hit hard, and if you can't do Ultima, this is a good fallback finisher to fall back to if you have the resources, and really go from there. Next, we have Glorious Reigning Dragon. Again, you can actually attack and poke with all these Excel Circle ones, for example, first. And then once you get to the Vanguard, this is where you can maybe attack with one column. It just depends what you call. And at that point, you can actually attack with the Vanguard, do the Counterblast 1, flip something of itself, and then return to, let's say, these for cell circles. And if you call anything that's like maybe it's kind of nutty. If you haven't done Percival and you have another Counterblast, or if you have another Kahiden and you have another Counterblast, you can start Superior Calling. And really, other than that, you can fall back to Agavails, and then of course they go into the soul, those cards, and bounce back, and you're just having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is the 6th attack. Then you're gonna have another 7, 8, 9, and then potentially 10, 11, 12 if you superior call more cards, if you have more Counterblast, for example. So it can get really nutty with Glorious Reigning Dragon. And then lastly, Bombarding Dragon. It's really the same concept where instead of these are from deck, these will be from hand. So whatever you have from hand, you can call them. And of course you draw 2, of course, with that respect. This has additional crit too. So this will be more threatening, especially if the opponent's like mid damage. So you're lethal at Thrametry even more. And if they're at 2, this can be a great hitter from putting them to basically 5 damage from 2 at that point if you get another drive track. Remember, your gold paladins or your deck thinning cards, quality rear guards, and then your drive tracks are more than likely going to be critical triggers or heal triggers or draw PGs. So that helps with that too. And that's the deck profile, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, credit to John and Duke for their feedback and their playtesting and everything. I really appreciate it. I really have fun playing with this deck. It's different from Ezo. It's different from Gurguit. Spectral Duke honestly gives that extra line of plays that we didn't have with the other grade 3s that we have over V series. So this is really fun to play. It's honestly stronger than I thought it was. So this is a really, really good casual deck. You can probably tweak it to more of a competitive build that's even better, but this is, I feel like it's a good starting template for anybody to pick up and actually tweak to their preference at that point. So again, it's Gold Paladin, Excel Gives, Ultima, all the shenanigans. You can have a lot of attacks, like 8, 9, 10 attacks pretty easily, for example. And then of course, you know, if you like the video, give it a like, and then comment down below, what are you guys' thoughts? You know, are there some cards that you're having some more success or different interesting line of plays or anything like that, going from standard to premium? Honestly, this is mostly a standard plus deck if you haven't realized it too, which is really cool. And some of the cards, honestly, most of the cards here can get back from the Clan Selection Plus, but of course you need to get in Percival or Aglaville from prior sets, and of course the G-Zone at that point too. So, and if you think that anybody wants to see this for Gold Paladins or even V Premium, or not V Premium, Premium, share the video with your friends and everything too. I appreciate that. It helps the channel out and everything. Support the channel too with TCG Player link. I have the link in the description below as well for more premium videos are coming up soon too. Deck profiles are coming more as we get more clan selection reviews, not clan selection reviews, but we're getting them actually shipped out recently, so there's going to be more deck profiles to come. And so with that, amigos, subscribe too as well. Love you all. Bye.